My name is Emily Clarke, and for 8 years, I believed loyalty was its own reward. I started at Halverton and Company, a mid-sized marketing firm in the city, as a junior assistant with nothing but a community college diploma and a heart that never stopped saying yes. I said yes to extra shifts, yes to staying late, yes to fixing other people's mistakes. Every report, every client presentation, every sleepless night, I built my reputation brick by brick, hoping someone would notice. And someone did. His name was Martin Reed, the creative director everyone feared and admired in equal measure. Martin liked results, not excuses. He had the charm of a man who knew his worth and the temper of someone who never questioned it. When he offered me a promotion to senior account coordinator, I thought it was the start of everything I'd worked for. I didn't know then that the same man who lifted me up would later throw me off the cliff he'd built. The project that changed everything was called Aurora, a $1 million campaign for a luxury skincare brand. I coordinated the entire launch, negotiated vendors, built timelines, and even rewrote Martin's pitch deck hours before the presentation. When the client signed, he got the standing ovation. I got a smile and a "good work, kid." A week later, rumors started spreading. Someone had leaked confidential budget files. Martin stormed into the office like thunder in a suit. He demanded names, explanations, heads to roll. By noon, HR called me in. There were printouts of emails I'd never written, transfers I'd never made, and a polite but cold woman across the table saying, "Emily, integrity is vital to this company." I tried to explain, to show that someone must have hacked my account, but Martin stood in the corner, arms crossed, silent. His silence spoke louder than any accusation. That day, they escorted me out of the building I'd practically lived in for nearly a decade. No goodbye party, no handshake, just the echo of heels on marble and the sting of eyes watching a fallen colleague. I went home with a box of office plants, framed certificates, and a throat too tight to swallow tears. My mother tried to comfort me, saying, "Good people don't stay down for long." But good people, I realized, get used as shields by the ones holding the knives. Weeks passed. Job applications vanished into the void. My savings drained fast, and my apartment began to feel smaller, darker. Yet something inside me refused to die, the need for truth. I began to dig. Through old backups on my external drive, I found the final Aurora presentation I'd written. Hidden in the metadata were traces of edits made from Martin's account, specifically the same night the leak occurred. The timestamps matched perfectly. He hadn't just framed me, he'd used my credentials to move files, leaving me as the scapegoat. Rage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. Mine whispered plan carefully. I spent nights mapping every digital breadcrumb. I called an old friend from IT, Ravi, who still worked at Halverton. When I told him what I suspected, he hesitated, then said quietly, "You didn't hear this from me, but Martin's about to be promoted to VP next quarter. The Aurora numbers made him look like a god. A promotion built on my ruins. That was when I stopped thinking like an employee and started thinking like a strategist." I created a folder titled Restoration. Inside it, I collected every email chain, every time-stamped file, every draft Martin had modified under my name. Ravi helped me confirm access logs, quietly, anonymously. We both knew if he were caught, he'd lose everything. Meanwhile, Martin's success grew. His face appeared in marketing magazines. He gave interviews about building a culture of trust. I watched them all, memorizing his smug smile. One afternoon, while scrolling through social media, I noticed that Halverton's biggest client, Aurora Skincare, was about to renew its contract. A live event was scheduled in 2 months, a gala celebration of partnership success. Every executive, including Martin, would be there. I knew then where my story would turn. I didn't want chaos or headlines. I wanted the same precision he'd used to destroy me. Revenge, I realized, isn't about rage. It's about restoration of balance. I started freelancing small marketing gigs under a pseudonym, rebuilding confidence. And while I worked, I crafted something else, a presentation, a perfect, irrefutable one. It contained every document, every log, every hidden trail linking Martin Reed to the fabricated leak. But instead of accusations, I built it like a story, a case study on ethics, leadership, and the unseen cost of ambition. My plan was simple. During the Aurora Renewal Gala, Halverton would unveil its next-gen campaign strategy. And in that same room, their projector would accidentally display one more file. Mine. By the time I was done drafting, my fear had turned into calm. I had nothing left to lose, and one truth to tell. The night of the gala, the city skyline glittered like temptation. I wore a rented black gown and borrowed confidence. Walking into that hotel ballroom felt like stepping back into my old life. But this time, I wasn't the one seeking approval. Martin stood near the stage, laughing with the CEO, a champagne glass in hand. He hadn't seen me yet. I could almost feel the moment his eyes would find mine. Confusion first, then disbelief. Ravi texted, "System ready." "Cue's yours," I smiled. It was time. The ballroom shimmered under soft, golden light, every crystal chandelier a reminder of how far I'd fallen, and how far I was about to rise again. Laughter floated through the air, blending with the faint hum of a jazz quartet in the corner. Waiters weaved between guests with silver trays, and the faint scent of champagne and perfume hung like pride in the air. For a moment, I stood near the back, watching the scene unfold as if I were a ghost at my own funeral. Martin Reed was at the center of it all, wearing his success like a tailored suit. He laughed easily, charmed effortlessly, and carried himself as though the world owed him applause. The CEO, Linda Barrett, stood beside him, beaming as she introduced him to the guests from Aurora Skincare. I recognized Julia Chen, Aurora's marketing director, a woman I'd once spoken to daily during the campaign. She didn't see me yet. She wouldn't recognize me immediately anyway. I wasn't the tired assistant she remembered. I was composed, deliberate, a quiet storm wrapped in satin. When Ravi's text came through, "We're live," projector synced. My pulse steadied. I took a glass of champagne from a passing waiter and waited for my cue. Martin stepped onto the small stage, microphone in hand, smiling like a man in control. "Good evening, everyone," he began. "Tonight isn't about me. It's about us. About the incredible partnership between Halverton and Company and Aurora Skincare." Polite applause. He paused dramatically, milking the crowd. "They say success is built on trust, and I couldn't agree more. Our achievements come from teamwork, integrity, and—" The screen behind him flickered. A faint ripple of movement caught his eye. His confident smile faltered for half a second. Then a new slide appeared. But it wasn't his. It was mine. Project Aurora, a case study on leadership ethics and the cost of ambition. He turned slightly, confusion settling into the corners of his expression. Seems there's a—" The projector advanced automatically. The next slide appeared, the first screenshot. An internal Halverton email, his name at the top. "Martin Reed, sent from emily.clarke@halvertonco.com." Gasps scattered through the audience like static. The CEO frowned, whispering to someone nearby. Martin's composure cracked. "Excuse me, if we could just—" He gestured toward the AV team, but they didn't move. Ravi had locked the feed remotely. The next slide appeared. System logs, timestamps, access trails. Everything I'd found, everything he'd erased. A murmur spread through the crowd. Julia Chen's eyes narrowed. She turned to the CEO and whispered sharply. I watched from the back, invisible, unbothered. It wasn't chaos. It was truth blooming in the light. Martin's voice broke slightly. This is a mistake. Someone is trying to sabotage. Then the final slide appeared. A recorded screen capture of his account logging into mine, uploading confidential budget files, and then deleting them 30 minutes later. Silence. No music, no laughter. Only the sound of him breathing into a microphone that had forgotten to mute itself. I stepped forward through the stunned crowd, every heel click echoing like punctuation marks on his downfall. He saw me then. His face turned white. "Emily," he whispered. The CEO's gaze snapped toward me. "You?" "Yes," I said softly. "The employee you fired for Martin's mistake." A few people turned their heads, recognition dawning. Someone whispered, "She's the one from that leak scandal." I didn't need to raise my voice. The truth carried itself. I never wanted revenge. I only wanted what was taken. My name, my dignity, my peace. Tonight, I'm giving back what was stolen. Martin tried to recover, his voice shaking. "She's lying! She's obsessed." But his protests only made him smaller. The evidence on the screen was irrefutable. Each file was time-stamped, each trail signed by his own arrogance. The CEO lifted a hand. "That's enough, Martin." Security didn't drag him out. Not yet. That would come later. For now, the silence did the work. I turned toward Julia Chen, whose expression had shifted from shock to quiet admiration. "The Aurora campaign wasn't his," I said. "Every design, every concept came from my desk." She studied me for a long moment. "I believe you." That was enough. The rest of the evening unfolded like a slow-motion car crash. Martin tried to corner me near the bar, but I walked away. HR executives whispered among themselves. By the time I left the ballroom, security was escorting him toward a side exit, his voice echoing behind me. Desperate, small, irrelevant. Outside, the night was cool and sharp, the city lights reflected in the glass towers like 1,000 quiet witnesses. I stood there for a long time, breathing. The weight I'd carried for 8 years finally lifted, replaced by something quieter than triumph. Peace. Ravi met me at the corner, his hands jammed in his coat pockets. "You did it," he said, his grin breaking the night's calm. "No," I said, smiling faintly. The truth did. He laughed softly. "Halverton's board will be in chaos by morning." I shrugged. "They can rebuild." I already have that night. I went home and slept for 10 hours straight. The kind of sleep that comes only when justice has been served without a scream. But the story didn't end there. 2 weeks later, an email appeared in my inbox. Subject: From Julia Chen, Aurora Skincare. She wrote, "Emily, I've reviewed your work from the Aurora campaign. I'm impressed, not only by the quality, but by your integrity under pressure. We're looking for a marketing consultant for our next launch. If you're interested, I'd love to talk." I stared at the screen for a long moment, tears welling. After everything, after the humiliation and silence, here it was. Not revenge, but redemption. I replied simply, "Thank you, Julia." I'd love to days later, as I walked into Aurora's sleek downtown office for the first time, I passed a newsstand. The headline caught my eye. Martin Reed resigns amid ethics investigation at Halverton and Company. I smiled to myself. It wasn't joy I felt. It was closure. At Aurora, Julia greeted me warmly and led me to a conference room overlooking the skyline. "You'll be leading our next campaign," she said. "We need someone we can trust." Trust. That word used to hurt. Now it felt like healing. We spent the next few weeks brainstorming, sketching, creating. For the first time in years, I felt seen. Not as an assistant, not as a scapegoat, but as someone whose work mattered. But one afternoon, as I was packing up, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Greater than you think you've won. This isn't over." Martin. I stared at the screen, calm. People like him never understand the difference between revenge and justice. They think silence is weakness, when in truth, it's control. I typed back, "It ended the night you lied." Then I blocked him. I walked out of the building and into the golden light of evening. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was chasing redemption. I was already living it. I wasn't just the employee they fired. I was the woman who rebuilt herself from the ashes they left behind. And this time, I didn't need anyone's approval to know my worth. 6 months passed since that night at the gala. The storm had come and gone, leaving silence in its wake, the kind of silence that no longer haunted me. Aurora's new campaign had become my sanctuary. Every morning I woke to sunlight, brewed coffee that didn't taste like exhaustion, and opened my laptop with something I hadn't felt in years: purpose. My name was finally printed on project documents. My email signature carried my title, Senior Marketing Consultant. And the people around me treated my words like they mattered. Sometimes, when I walked past a mirror, I barely recognized myself. The tired assistant who once carried coffee trays for people who called her kiddo was gone. In her place stood someone sharper, steadier, carved by fire, but not consumed by it. Life, as it often does, started feeling normal again. Until the email came. Subject: a recommendation request. It was from Halverton's HR department. They were conducting a background check for an applicant, Martin Reed. Apparently, he had applied to a new agency, and they wanted a reference from anyone who had previously worked with him. I almost laughed at the irony. I sat there for a long moment, fingers hovering over the keyboard. The old Emily would have ignored it, afraid of getting involved. But the new one, she didn't hide from ghosts. She met them head on. I wrote back politely. "Greater than Martin Reed and I worked together for 8 years. He is talented and persuasive. However, I would advise you to verify the integrity of his previous project history, particularly the Aurora campaign." I reread it twice before hitting send. No venom, no insults, just truth wrapped in professionalism. That was my kind of revenge, not fire, but frost. 2 weeks later, I received a message from Julia Chen. "Thought you'd like to know. Halverton is officially under audit. Apparently your little presentation started a domino effect." I smiled faintly. Karma had its own way of keeping time. A month later, while walking to lunch, I spotted someone sitting alone on a park bench. Hunched shoulders, crumpled suit, eyes lost in the distance. For a heartbeat, I didn't recognize him. Then he looked up. Martin. He saw me too. His face flickered between surprise, guilt, and something else. Regret, maybe. I should have walked away, but something rooted me in place. He stood slowly, adjusting his wrinkled jacket. "Emily," he said, voice low, tired. "You look different." "I should," I said quietly. "I'm not your assistant anymore." He gave a small, humorless laugh. Yeah, I heard. You're with Aurora now. Congratulations. There was no sarcasm in his tone, just emptiness. The man who once filled rooms with arrogance now looked like a shell trying to remember its shape. He hesitated. You ruined me. I met his eyes. Calm. No, Martin. You did that yourself. I just stopped taking the blame for it. He looked away, jaw tight. You have no idea what it's like to lose everything. I tilted my head. Don't I? The words hung in the air like a mirror, one he didn't want to look into. He sighed, running a hand through his greying hair. I was going to apologize. But maybe it's too late for that. It's not too late to be honest, I said softly. That's where you should have started. He nodded faintly, eyes lowered. You were good, Emily. Better than any of us. I knew it. That's why I had to. He stopped himself. Forget it. I already have, I said, turning to leave. Take care, Martin. He didn't call after me, just stood there, a man alone with his choices. That night, I sat by my apartment window, city lights flickering like quiet applause from a world that had finally seen me. I thought about him, not with anger, but with the kind of pity reserved for people who never learned the difference between ambition and greed. Revenge, I realized, had never been about destroying him. It was about rebuilding myself in the space he tried to bury. Weeks turned into months. Aurora's campaign went global, and I began traveling: Paris, Milan, Singapore. Each city a new chapter, each success a quiet echo of the woman who once packed her desk in tears. But no matter how far I went, I never forgot the lesson that started it all. Sometimes silence is louder than shouting, and patience is the sharpest weapon of all. One evening, while sitting in my hotel room in London, I opened a new journal, leather-bound, gold-edged, a gift from Julia. I titled the first page, The Employee They Fired, and I began to write. Not for revenge, not for closure, but to remember. To remember the woman who refused to stay broken. To remember that integrity doesn't need recognition to exist. And to remind myself that the best victories are quiet ones. I wrote until the city lights dimmed, until my reflection stared back from the window. Not as a victim, not even as a survivor, but as a creator. Someone who built her peace out of the ruins of betrayal. When I finally closed the journal, I whispered to the night, I forgive you, Martin. But I'll never forget what you taught me. Because forgiveness, I'd learned, isn't weakness. It's freedom. And I had spent enough years in cages built by other people's choices. The next morning, as my plane lifted off toward another city, I looked down at the world below. Small, distant, beautiful. Somewhere down there, Martin Reed was probably still trying to rebuild his reputation. I hoped he did. Everyone deserves a chance to change. But I also hoped he remembered the woman he once underestimated. The one who taught him that truth doesn't whisper forever. The clouds parted, sunlight filling the cabin, and I smiled quietly to myself. I wasn't the assistant. I wasn't the scapegoat. I wasn't even the victim anymore. I was the author of my own ending, and my silence had already spoken louder than any scream ever could. Because sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't to destroy someone. It's to live so well that they have to watch from the shadows.